This is the Nearly Famous Barry Young Show.
Really like an Easter story. If you think about it, it is an Easter story. What is the essence of Easter? Jesus is raised from the dead, right? Well, in that vein, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to announce at the beginning of the show, President Obama's drunk uncle is out of the drunk tank and back on the road. Ow! Holy cow! How many people do we have in the studio today? Welcome. The Nearly Famous Barry Young Show is on the air. No, that's true. Uncle Oyango Obama. Remember, he got arrested for DUI up there, and where was he, Babinski? Up there in Massachusetts somewhere, and he blew through a stop sign, almost hit a police car, and the police were looking at him, and he flipped the police off. So they took him down to the station house, found out he was drunk as a skunk, and they took him down to the station house, and he was saying, call my nephew. And they thought he was crazy till they looked at the driver's license, and they said, well, we got a problem here. And they did call the White House and found out that, indeed, he is the uncle of the President of the United States, an illegal alien uncle of the President of the United States, by the way. And they took his driver's license away, and 45 days, but he went back in and he said, this is a hardship case. I have a hardship case. Even though the feds say I don't belong here, I have this hardship case. So they call it the DMV up in Massachusetts. They call it the RMV, the Registry of Motor Vehicles. And they said, well, he met all the criteria for a hardship license because he makes his money as a liquor store manager, appropriately. And he's got to get to the liquor store. I mean, if the liquor store doesn't open, the whole town's in jeopardy. So he's got to get to the liquor store. And he is in an alcohol treatment program, and he is an illegal alien. But we're not going to let that bother us, and so he has his license back on a hardship case. There it is. It is truly like a resurrection story. Once I was without wheels, and now I am. God bless America. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, a happy note, we welcome you to the program. All of us are here today. Here she is, Cruella Michelle Buffy Lee Larson, and thank you, Raul, and our own Babinski in the Master Control Center. And by the way, throughout the program today, we have a Babinski on special assignments. This is Super Tuesday going on. It has nothing to do with the elections. Today, it's Palin versus Perky. Sarah Palin is over on NBC, and Perky Couric is over at ABC. And they're doing fill-in duties today, and it comes on at 7:00 in the Mountain Time Zone, the Arizona time zone, and so it's on now. This don't leave our show. God knows we're in trouble. We're in financial trouble. We need you. But this is NBC and ABC, and Babinski will be keeping a close eye on the bloggers and on the ratings meters and on the television script. Who's winning so far, by the way? Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, our own Andrew Babinski. Who's winning? Perky versus Palin.
Well, I've only watched the Today Show, so I'm going to go with Sarah Palin.
I understand. Based on what you've seen, it has to be. So what do they do this morning to make it, special? There she is. Everybody's talked about her. NBC. Was it NBC or CBS that they handed her one of the most rocky questions during the presidential run? That was Katie Couric, and she was over
CBS.
CBS,
right? At the time, yes, because she was news. She was news babe, head news babe at CBS.
And
at that point,
Perky asked Palin, do you read papers? But Palin couldn't say which newspapers she read. I think that's pretty much in a nutshell the way it went. About right.
What do you read?
Yeah,
exactly. What do you like in the morning when you get up? Like when we get up and we get ready for the show. What do you read? Well, that's a pretty easy question for me. But
Playboy magazine for me before prepping.
Before, during, and after.
Well, yeah. And Palin couldn't answer the question. So what have they done for her over at NBC so far?
They started the Today Show with a little comedy routine, where Ann Curry and Matt Lauer were sitting at the anchor desk. Now, another thing, they sold this all day yesterday that Sarah Palin was going to be hosting the Today Show. So far, she's just been a guest. Matt Lauer is interviewing. Mm-hmm. But she's sitting, Palin's sitting on the couch, and they show just a shot from her shoulders up. And then they go back to Lauer and Ann Curry, and they say, where's Sarah? Is she getting ready for today? And they go back, and she's surrounded by newspapers, and she's reading 3. And when the camera catches her reading, she hides them underneath her arm.
Oh, yeah, cue the laugh track.
Even the studio audience didn't find that amusing.
No, it might have been the poor delivery from our own
I want to see her do the weather.
Everybody's got to start somewhere.
No. Why can't you do the Smuckers' birthdays?
That's a good question. Why can't you do that? I'd love to see that. I think it'd be interesting to have her do the weather, but she's just, no matter what, she's not going to reach the weather level of Caribe Divine. Not going to make it.
You have to admit the woman has star quality, however.
Absolutely.
She does.
Question. Well, that brings us to 14 minutes after the hour that we've blown so far on the program. And listen, coming up in just a moment, the President of the United States threatened to disband the Supreme Court yesterday. Well, not really, but he dissed him.
He threatened them.
I think you're right. He threatened the Supreme Court. And I'll tell you what I'm really worried about. I feel that I'm carrying a burden today. And the reason why is that our country is populated with many citizens who have not a clue how this whole thing, the Supreme Court, the Congress, and the President works.
Now, what you really wanted to say, but now you're going to leave it up to me to do the heavy lifting.
Heavy lifting, right.
Yes, is what you really wanted to say is that our country is populated by a lot of morons.
Yeah, nitwits, morons, that sort of thing.
How about JPS? Would that apply?
I think it would apply here. And they have no idea how these three branches of government are supposed to work. So the president marches out yesterday, and he's throwing these words, combative, it was threatening, it was demeaning, and he's throwing out this thing about these unelected people. Why these unelected people? They can't blow down the Obama law. They're just out of time. By the way, he said Republicans have done this. Republicans have talked about the court doing this kind of thing. So now we're going to do it. And I'm also, by the way, I have to hand it to our own Cruella Michelle Buffy Lee Larson, who saw this train wreck coming 24 hours before it hit.
I did.
She warned us all. We just didn't know. I didn't know.
I told you about 6:30 yesterday morning.
I didn't know
it was going to fall down like bricks from the sky.
But I thought they were going to hold off until after the ruling. I didn't know that he was going to war against the United States government. Yesterday. I had no idea that he would do it. Yesterday.
In a little bit, we should talk about this, but this is a perfect strategy.
Maybe he can start talking and deceiving the JPS, the just plain stupid group out there, by threatening to sue the Supreme Court if they don't give him the ruling, which he believes, I put he in capital letters, he believes that he should be getting.
I can guarantee you this has never happened in our lifetime.
No, this is a little, I'm telling you, I'm a little frightened. I mean, would the president declare martial law for the medical industry or something if they doesn't get the ruling? So all of that is coming up. Plus, why Democrats in the Arizona legislature are arming themselves against a rogue legislator who's running around threatening and pushing people. He's threatening and pushing
the Democrats.
Democrats.
Think about it.
I was watching this on TV last night.
Somebody from their own ranks is what's...
And these people are
unbelievable.
Well, it's a rogue legislator, and I had to go out and buy a gun, and I thought, oh, my God, the Republicans are doing this again. No, they're all Democrats. They're scared witless this morning, and they don't know what to do because this guy's running around, and they are afraid that when they bounce him out of the legislature on account of the fact that he's a bully nitwit, crazy man, that's going to make him go really nuts, and he's going to start shooting up the works and killing people. So I'm talking, of course, about the loose cannon David Patterson. David Patterson. Yeah. All right.
Alleged girlfriend and wife beater and so on and so forth. And
live-in
so forth.
girlfriend is the disbarred attorney who came out and said, he beat me up. Oh, no, he didn't. Oh, no, but he did. He beat me up. Look at these bruises. Oh, I got these bruises from something else. The whole thing is just...
disgraceful?
Absolutely. There's no question. And all of this disgracefulness we plan to bring you in great detail today here on this, our humble program.
I have a dream. I have a dream today. In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
You just gotta ignite the light and let it shine.
I said to Babinski. I said to Babinski just a moment ago, are you sure this is only a test? And he said, yes, it's only a test. If it were the real alert, I wouldn't be here to tell you it's a test. That's the kind of commitment we bring to you each morning here on this, the nearly famous Barry Young Show. Goodness here. It's 7:25 on the program. And ladies and gentlemen, with this, we bring you to great moments in the presidency. Yes, indeed. We had a great moment in the history of the presidency yesterday here in our federal democratic republic when the current president of the United States, Barack Hussein Obama, came up with a good one. He, of course, in attacking the United States Supreme Court, which we're going to get to in just a moment. In fact, right after the news update, that's just a couple of minutes away, we'll get into the nature of the attack on the United States Supreme Court, why it is unprecedented, why sitting presidents don't do that, why Supreme Court justices don't attack the presidency, and why, well, we'll get to the whole thing. And for those of you who happen to be absent of the 5 minutes that your public school tried to teach the Constitution of the United States, and in that vein, they probably tried to teach it to you with that living document changeable BS approach that many of the schools are using, we'll give you the full explanation of why the president was in such error yesterday. But here's what he did. This is the first thing. He said that he is confident. In fact, let me read you the quote. I am confident that this, meaning Obamacare, I'm confident that this will be upheld because it should be upheld. All right. Now, that is known as circular reasoning. It is an argument that relies upon its own proposition. It is because, well, it is. I love this. I'm confident that this will be upheld because it should be.
I'm feeling very confident this morning. You know why? I predicted this yesterday in those same words. Mm-hmm. That they believe it to be constitutional just, well, because they believe.
Yes.
Because they want it to be. And then again, if you look at the second part, the Constitution doesn't really matter now, does it, Barry?
Not to them.
Not to them.
Not to them. And this is not the first time that the president has attacked the Supreme Court. Oh, let me back up for a moment, getting ahead of myself. His circular reasoning was not the attack on the Supreme Court. His attack on the Supreme Court is that he referred to them as a group of unelected people.
Ouch.
Yeah, they were unelected people. They wouldn't dare strike down Obamacare because these unelected people can't turn the country upside down and inside out. And that's the thing that's bothering me, because we're going to have nitwits running around, know-nothings with a voter registration card who believes there's validity in that saying, well, they're unelected. What are they doing there? Why don't we just ignore them?
Well, and that is exactly the point. I love what you just said, because this president is going to try to turn the Supreme Court judicial review into a political branch of the government, just as the legislative branch, the executive branch, and now we're going to have judicial review be political.
Right.
In other words, beholden to opinion on the front page of a newspaper.
There's going to be some of these, I don't know what they are, the Occupy Wall Street people or the MoveOn.com people or the George Soros people are going to come along. I predict that you are going to hear some nitwit pop up in a news show somewhere asking, well, why don't we go ahead and change the Constitution to make these Supreme Court justices stand for election and re-election?
Oh, my.
It's going to come. They've already proposed that we do away with the Electoral College and turn this into a real autocracy where the President of the United States speak, and you, Michelle, will hop, and so will Babinski, and so will I. And they
be a
proposed
plutocracy.
This. Yeah, okay. And this is, you're going to hear this. And, of course, in our explanation this morning, you'll hear why the Founding Fathers, why the Constitution was specifically written so that these people are insulated from the popular vote, why they're insulated in many ways from society in general, because their job is to be insulated and take a look at the Constitution and determine what's permissible under it, and most importantly, what isn't. And that, moments away on KFYI, as the president makes war against the United States Supreme Court.
Barry Young, 550 KFYI, KFYI.com. Rush, later today at 10:06. Now, Barry Young, News Talk 550 KFYI.
KFYI.com.
Not only did the president threaten the Supreme Court, he warned conservative commentators. His words. He warned us. Holy cow. Babinski, make sure the doors are locked. Make sure the doors are sandbagged. Open the windows and keep watching. I don't know what he's about to do. Well, look, it was the most bizarre and strange language yet of the Obama administration, as President Obama's drunk uncle was getting his driver's license back yesterday in the state of Massachusetts. The president came out along with the president of Mexico. Who else did he have with him? I guess he had the prime minister of Canada with him, and they talked about everything except the pipeline. And he warned the Supreme Court. He threatened them. He said, you can't overturn the Obamacare. And, well, let's just listen to this. We're going to play in the president's words. Here's what he says. This is how he views the Supreme Court and the 26 cases, 26 states have signed on to this lawsuit. This is how he views 26, it.
Yeah. Ultimately, I'm confident that the Supreme Court will not take what would be an unprecedented, extraordinary step of overturning a law that was passed by a strong majority of a democratically elected Congress.
Okay, all right. Now, what is wrong with this statement?
I know.
Right, you can start.
You want to hear it again?
Yeah. Just plain stupid.
This is just delightful, and I have to credit Senator Orrin Hatch from Utah with this, but he said it must be nice living in a fantasy world where every law you like is constitutional.
Yeah. Well,
and every Supreme Court decision you don't like is activism.
Yeah. Well, I promise you this half hour of the show, a definition of what constitutes judicial activism. But let's take what the president said. He said that the court, if they overturn Roe versus Wade, a law that was passed by a majority of elected officials, he said that would be unprecedented. Okay, right away, personal foul. Not to correct the President of the United States, but to correct his idiotic statement, most of the most historic decisions of the Supreme Court, including Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, which held that separate but equal education in our public schools was unconstitutional because it wasn't equal. And it struck down segregation all across the United States. That's one of the most historic in my lifetime. Also, Roe versus Wade, the issue of abortion, where the Supreme Court found its way to a right of privacy between doctor and patient. So under that right of privacy.
No. Cut it off at the doctor-patient.
Well, there you go.
Just a plain old right of privacy.
And how about Marbury versus Madison? This goes back to the early days of the United States, which has to do with judicial review itself. Does the Supreme Court have the right to go in and say Congress and the Senate passed this law? Is it constitutional? Do we even have the right to do it? So this is some of the bedrock of the United States of America. There's lots of cases that have overturned the law. Second thing is that he overstated this thing about it being passed by a majority of elected officials. Not one Republican.
Not one vote.
In either the House or the Senate. Not one.
And in the Senate, they squeaked by the hair of their chinny chin chin with 60 votes, which is exactly what they needed in the Senate to pass this law. And
well, just squeak by, get do the House, 219 to 212 in the House.
219 to 212, which means with the majority they had at the time, they did not even get all of their Democrats.
So right.
Don't come crying to me, Prez.
See, so this statement that he made first, that this would be unprecedented, that these 9 unelected people would strike down a law, is not only bizarre, it's just plain ignorant. It's misleading on either if he's not purposefully trying to mislead the American people and state an outright lie, then it's ignorant.
How can it be anything but? I mean, this guy is either the dumbest law professor, meaning constitutional law professor from the University of Chicago, in the history of our lifetime, the dumbest guy to ever be president of the Harvard Law Review, to come out and say, because the Congress passed a law, the Supreme Court, now ignoring again Marbury v. Madison, ignoring judicial review, ignoring 3 separate branches, they're obligated to say it's fine because the Congress passed it.
Right.
This is an outrage.
Then why do you have the Supreme Court?
Why do you have the court?
So, and look, he also, and another reason this is just bizarre is that he tried to portray Obamacare as a very popular congressional act. Right now, The country stands at about 73% opposed. It'll get up to 75 as people learn more about it.
But, you and I were talking yesterday, and I said that this has been evil genius on the part of the Democrats and administration. Evil genius, because all the best parts, if you will, all the ornaments hanging on the Christmas tree have been put forward, have been put into action. The taxes and the backstory and the back-ass crazy nasty stuff that's going to fall on our heads in about 2014, well, it's put off a couple of years. By the time that this snowball is rolling downhill, it will have gotten so big and picked up so much speed, there will be no stopping it. That was the intention from the start.
I think so. But the President of the United States depicted the Supreme Court as a bunch of unelected. He basically said they're rabble, is what he said. They're just these guys.
He called them boobs.
Yeah. All right, but look, there's more. Let me just, before we pause for a second, let me play you the rest of what. Not only did he threaten the Supreme Court, he threatened the newspaper industry, he threatened the broadcast industry, he threatened the bloggers, he threatened everybody who commentates on anything. Listen.
And I just remind conservative commentators that for years what we've heard is the biggest problem on the bench was judicial activism or a lack of judicial restraint.
Okay. He's right. From many people like me and other hosts, you, bloggers everywhere, newspaper columnists, they have babbled incessantly over time about judicial activism. First time I heard it, Earl Warren, they thought he was a very conservative Chief Justice, at least when they appointed him. Eisenhower appointed him. He turned out to be one of the most liberal and judicially activist judges in the history of the United States.
We still go back and refer to the Warren Court.
Right. But now we need to not only talk about Constitution 101, which we'll do, and why the Supreme Court is unelected. I promise we'll get to that in a moment. But now this raises the question of, well, what is this judicial activism thing? I mean, if Republicans have complained about it, courts getting into places they ought not to get into, then we need to talk about what this judicial activism thing is.
Oh, I have an answer for you.
All right, all that is moments away here on this, the nearly famous, etc., so forth.
The nearly famous Barry Young Show. 550 KFYI. KFYI.com.
I mean, look, there's a lot of ground to cover. But here's what we want to do on the show. By the way, it's 7:53, the nearly famous Barry Young Show. Here's what I want to do on the show. We want to cover what the president said about judicial activism, but in order to get to that and talk about what this judicial activism is and why, no matter what the court rules this time, it will not be judicial activism, which no matter which way they go, it's not going to be that. But in order to understand any of that, if you are, I was talking to the other night at a scout function, a young man who's in a big, well-known public school. That's not even public; it's private school here in this community. I'm not going to tell you who because it's embarrassing to the school. Here's a guy who was in the 10th or 11th grade, and we got into a discussion about Obamacare and about private property rights and all of that. Of course, he's on the wrong side. He's idealistic. He's a young guy. And I stopped him in the middle of one of his long-winded explanations. I said, let me ask you a question. Hey, you're in what grade? You're in high school. Have you ever read the Constitution? He said, well, I didn't read that part of the Constitution. Well, have you ever read the Constitution? You pick it up and read it like a Reader's Digest. You ever do that? And he says, well, no, I don't have the time to go through. I said, time? It's 4 pages.
It's the shortest document in the history of the planet when it comes to anything.
And he said, well,
legally binding.
I know about it. He said, he started off quoting the Declaration of Independence. I thought, you're already on the wrong document. It's not the
That's a frequent occurrence.
Yeah.
Don't you find that to be true?
And it comes from, unfortunately, ignorance, a lack of knowledge. Not just being ignorant and incapable of learning, but that our schools have not properly exposed a lot of these kids to them. And it's not just them. It's multiple generations. It's people in their 30s and 40s who haven't bothered to read the friggin' Constitution that governs everything you do. That, when I say govern, it keeps the government from micromanaging everything you have. So let's take a minute and talk about this thing about the Supreme Court being unelected. Constitution 101, most important thing you need to know. They are not up for popular election. Federal judges never run for popular election. They are appointed by the president, and then their name is sent over to the U.S. Senate. Sometimes the Senate calls them in and questions them, almost always.
They are appointed and then confirmed.
Right. So the check and balance where the people get to speak, actually the Senate's supposed to represent the states, but it happens in the Senate. And sometimes they bounce them out. They say, no, we don't want you.
That's exactly right. Let's go back 30 years now. Or is it more? 35? How far are we gone back? We have a common saying now, if you can't get appointed through your Senate appointment or through the senators, you get borked. Right? Remember when Robert Bork did not get confirmed by the Senate to take his seat on the Supreme Court?
And you know what? Almost, I'm sorry, I'm having a mental block right now. Who almost else did not get? One of the most conservative members of the Supreme Court, a real legislative genius, because of the Anita Hill controversy. And
Justice Thomas.
Justice Thomas.
Right.
Almost didn't get confirmed over there. He basically went in one Saturday morning and said, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of you beating me up. Confirm me or let me go. Tell me what you want.
Just tell me what you want to do. Yeah.
Now, why is it that the founding fathers of the United States did not want federal judges to have to run for election? Because we don't live in a democracy. The Supreme Court is one of the insulators from this being a democracy. We don't want judges run out because they may have ruled on the constitutionality of something or the unconstitutionality of something that the majority wants. Let me give you an example. In the United States, in 1956, Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, majority of the country wanted the schools segregated. The court comes up and says, no, that's unconstitutional the way that's being set up. The country would have voted him out.
Well, we've got a second part to that. Can you imagine our justices, meaning the Supreme Court? Just think of that first. Running for office, throwing fundraisers, hitting the rope lines, kissing babies, and shaking hands.
Being beholden to somebody. You owe somebody a favor, so you got to be careful about your ruling. All right, wait. There's more. This thing with Obama yesterday is so fundamentally anti-American that it warrants taking this into the next hour. It's coming up on KFYI.